Hi, welcome to the design process video for my record cover project for DVB 102. For this assessments task, I decided to design a vinyl record cover for the psychedelic Australian band Tame Impala, and I chose their third album, Currents. Currents was released in July 2015, and like its predecessor, it won ARIA Awards for Best Rock Album and Album of the Year. Guided by the musical genius Kevin Parker, their music is very individualistic with a nostalgic psychedelic disco vibe. Here are some of Tame Impala's previous album covers. I wanted to keep these in mind as I didn't want my work to be too close to anything they've produced before. In my initial brainstorming, I sat down and listened to the album a couple of times whilst writing down key themes, words and feelings I got from each song. I also wrote down some of the lyrics that really stood out to me and could influence my initial sketches. When listening to the songs, I realised how repetitive and loopy some of the tracks were. Sometimes I would be stuck in a loop for a while, waiting for the beat to drop, kind of like a release. After listening to the album a couple of times, I chose 4 key words to focus on to develop my designs further: groovy, psychedelic, repetitive, and Australian. I chose these words because I feel as though they all speak to the music through my eyes. These were some of my initial sketches I did right after my initial brainstorming. I had the album still playing in the background and let my creativity flow. At this stage, I knew I wanted to experiment with 2 different mediums of design, Illustrator and photography. Furthermore, I searched through interviews Kevin Parker had done about the album and what he had to say about producing it. This helped me gain a better understanding of the meaning behind the album and how other people describe it when they listen to it. I wanted to do some album research, so I started off looking at Australian bands with a similar target audience and music style to Tame Impala's. I found covers for Ocean Alley, Lime Cordiale, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. They were all super fun and different and used a lot of colour and unrealistic elements. My style research was heavily based around my illustrated designs, as after I went out and did some field research to take photos of flora and fauna around the botanical gardens, I knew that I wanted to focus more on how the music made me feel rather than its origins. My typography research was again based around more individualistic, retro, trippy style to ensure it reflected my illustrations. These are some examples of artwork from artists that inspired me throughout my whole design process: Georgia Perry, Andrew Foote, and Golden Days. I chose 3 illustrations and 3 photographs to further unpack and design into rough drafts, as I wanted to make sure I explored the 2 mediums to a final draft cover. Furthermore, I started drawing more detailed design on my first illustration sketch to demonstrate the individual elements and how they could stand out from each other once I started to make the design in colour. Unfortunately, these are a couple of designs that didn't make the cut. I made 2 other illustrations and used photography for 3 other of the covers. And this is the first draft of my album cover that I decided to develop further. My main focus of this cover was the repetitive theme of Tame Impala's music and the reverbs in the lyrics of the songs. These are a few iterations that I made after my first draft, playing around with colour and typography. This is the completed record cover for Tame Impala Currents album. When developing my final cover from my initial draft, I decided to add a lot more layers into the image to make it more intricate and mind-bending. I also played around with the typography and placement, but ended up keeping it in the same corners but making the text larger and giving it a white border to sit on to make sure it wasn't lost in the image. I didn't really want the typography to take over the design, so that's why I pushed it out to the corners. The back of the album lists the tracks on either side of the album and the length of each song. I wanted to keep the same design across the front and back of the album as it is so intricate, repetitive, and eye-capturing. I considered a range of design principles: line, form, space, typography, colour, and repetition when developing my final album cover. Each design principle and how I utilised it can be found on my Behance profile. Here are some examples of the design iterations I did during my final stages of designing. Here are mock-ups of the front of the vinyl cover, the back, and the center of the vinyl disc. This is my poster design, and it is an extension of the album cover, as it utilizes the same illustration, colors, and font. The box is also similar to the one on the back of the album cover and utilizes the yellow from the illustration as a border. I wanted to also carry over the idea of repetitiveness by bringing the album name Currents down the poster in a range of colors, also utilized in the illustration. I'm so excited and proud of my final designs that I produced. When I first sat down to start this assignment, I was so overwhelmed and confused at how I'd produced something I honestly loved and that I thought reflected Tame Impala's aesthetic. I think the funky illustration I designed really reflects the nostalgic psychedelic disco vibe of Currents and highlights the repetitive nature of their music and lyrics, which really stuck with me. Thank you.